Make it up. Make it up. Welcome to SULFUR Salon.
Today, we're diving into a really substantial piece, Mohsen Elbelasy's Joyce Mansour, The Tuberose Baby Girl. It's this incredibly deep, philosophical, critical, and anatomical study of the Egyptian-French surrealist poet.
Yeah, it's a hugely ambitious work. The scope is, well, it's impressive.
It really is, and that's maybe the first thing we need to talk about, the sheer scale and how the structure handles its intellectual weight.
Absolutely. That ambition is, I think, its biggest strength. The author frames it as both an archaeology and a prophecy, a philosophic, critical, anatomical exploration.
Right.
But, and this is the crux of the first point, that density, that intellectual layering means the reader sometimes works too hard just figuring out where they are, moving between the history and the theory.
Exactly. So our first topic, to really maximize engagement across such a complex work, we think more explicit structural cues are needed, specifically to bridge Mansour's life story and the deep philosophical analysis of her work. We need sort of better signposting.
It's about weaving them together more clearly. The weakness right now is that you have these very dense, specialized sections on theory.
Yeah, like Bataille's de Ponce, Foucault, Matta, heavy stuff.
Right, really high-level concepts. And they sit, sometimes quite abruptly, next to detailed historical accounts, like, the development of Khedive Cairo or the Suez Crisis expulsion.
And that juxtaposition, while it shows the depth, it can be disorienting. You jump from a hard fact, a date, to this very abstract theoretical plane.
The reader's left making the connection themselves a bit too often, I think.
So the suggestion here is pretty straightforward. Introduce clearer rhetorical markers, maybe even dedicated bridge sections that explicitly link the historical context to the critical interpretation. Guide the reader through that shift.
Give them conceptual handrails, essentially.
Exactly, like concrete roadmaps. For instance, after detailing the whole geopolitical situation around her departure in 56...
Which is laid out very well.
Very well. But then, you could explicitly frame the next discussion, her language, as a linguistic heterotopia. Use that term up front.
Right. Say, we've seen the historical event. Now let's look at how this manifests linguistically, using Foucault's idea of a heterotopia, a kind of non-place, to understand how her French carries the psychic residue of Egypt.
Use the term like a map before you dive into analyzing the poems on that page.
Yeah. Or, another idea, maybe introduce these interpretive sections with a specific heading, like morphological map, loss and poetics.
Ooh, I like that.
You explicitly link the life event, losing Egypt, Samir's imprisonment, directly to the poetic outcome, her focus on loss as a crucible. It tells the reader why you're bringing in that specific philosophical lens right then.
It confirms the necessity of the anatomy alongside the philosophy of that precise moment. That kind of structural clarity would really tighten the whole argument, I think.
Definitely. And it actually leads nicely into the second point, which is about how Mansour herself is positioned, particularly against, the wider surrealist context.
Right. The author makes a compelling case for her as this figure of countermodernity, someone who really challenges disciplinary boundaries. The goal seems to be proving her uniqueness.
And it's a strong goal. But to really land that claim, to make her transcendence clear, the critique needs to foreground her specific linguistic and thematic innovations first, before placing her against the backdrop of the male surrealist figures.
Let her singularity be the starting point.
Exactly. Because the weakness, and it's tricky because the context is necessary.
Sure, you need Breton, Sade, Bataille, Flaubert comparisons.
You do, but the sheer weight of that contextualization, her relationships, the homages, the parallels, sometimes inadvertently clouds the main claim, that her voice is, as the text says, utterly unique in literary history.
It risks making her seem, well, not derivative, but maybe less radically original than she was, especially concerning her ideas about the body, the agender body.
Precisely. The focus on the male influences and the movement's history can unintentionally overshadow her groundbreaking work, especially on gender fluidity in her texts.
So the suggestion is amplify the direct evidence from Mansour. More close reading, more direct quotes, especially from her prose where those gender lines blur or where her really visceral imagery pops.
Let her words be the primary evidence of her revolutionary stance. Then bring in the comparisons.
Anchor the claims in her own linguistic practice first. So when discussing her body as a place of sacrifices and myths, or her linguistic cannibal identity,
Yeah?
spend more time analyzing a specific raw line first, like that one from Chris. My ovaries, full of silt, suffocate in your hands.
Wow. Yes. That line is pure Mansour. Start there. That's the visceral proof of her rebellion, right? Before you even mention Sade or Bataille.
Exactly. Or look at her own contribution to surrealist games, that word mamo.
Which the author defines as youth, a vampire not yet weaned.
Yeah. Present those unique fragments, her words, her coinages, as the core evidence of her poetics of disorder, her refusal of abstraction. Make her critique the anchor, not just her connections to others.
That approach really puts her autonomous genius front and center, which actually brings us quite naturally to her roots, right? Her early life in Cairo.
You can't really talk about her self-generated language without talking about where it came from. And the material on Kitaval Cairo in this study it's exceptional.
It really is a goldmine. Fantastic detail. Which leads to the third point. This brilliant material on Cairo's socioeconomic and cultural life provides such a strong foundation. It just needs to be woven even more tightly into the specific genesis of her themes, alienation, desire, that whole complex.
Right now, the weakness is that this incredibly rich historical backdrop, the details about Zamalek, Azbekaya, Garden City, the Francophone circles, Art et Liberté.
All fascinating stuff.
Absolutely. But it functions a bit too much like just backdrop. The study notes her alienation was acute, that loss was a crucible, yes. But the mechanism, how did that specific socio-geographic reality, those two Romes, East-West or traditional modern, how did that directly forge her very visceral, very specific language of death, decay, and eroticism? That link needs sharpening.
The groundwork is all there. It just needs activating, making that causal chain explicit. So the suggestion is,
connect the dots more directly. Link the rupture of exile, the fractured geographies of her childhood.
which are well documented. Link them directly to her specific literary symbols, especially that unique blend she creates, Egyptian mythology, Osiris, Anubis, cobras, mummies, fused with those Western surrealist tropes, Eros, Thanatos.
And we need to see how the external pressures, political, personal, directly erupt into those symbols in her work?
You could, for example, really leverage the contrast the author mentions, that childhood dream of running away to the pyramids.
Yeah, that rebellious fantasy.
And put it right beside the harsh reality of being deported to Switzerland in '56. Put those two geographical moments in explicit dialogue. Show the tension fueling the poetry.
Or when analyzing her use of Egyptian myths like Osiris. Show how her subversion of that life-death boundary, her passion for life coming through the resurrection myth, isn't just thematic. It's an active geographical reclamation of the Nile, of Egypt, in her writing. It's her fighting back against the physical expulsion through myth.
Exactly. It shows her reclaiming the Nilotic world poetically because she lost it physically. That provides the so what for all that amazing Cairo research. It shifts Cairo from just being a setting to being an active engine of her imagination.
That makes so much sense. Look, this has been, I think, a really productive look at what is truly a staggering piece of scholarship. The depth here is just essential for anyone studying surrealism or Mansour.
Absolutely essential. And just to recap the main opportunities we discussed for refining it further. First, strengthening those structural transitions, using clearer conceptual maps or rhetorical anchors to guide the reader between the deep philosophy and the biography.
Second, really foregrounding Mansour's unique voice, anchoring the claims about her originality and her poetics of disorder firmly in her text, her language, before bringing in the comparisons with the wider surrealist movement, especially the male figures.
And third, deepening that connection with Cairo, explicitly demonstrating how the historical context, the geographical ruptures, the political exiles directly fueled her specific thematic obsessions and her unique use of Nilotic mythology.
These are really about ensuring the reader can fully appreciate the journey through the complexity of Mansour's life and work, making sure the impact of the incredible research lands as powerfully as possible.
We genuinely hope these suggestions are helpful. The material is exceptional, and we'd certainly encourage the author to consider these points, and please, feel free to submit the revised work back to us.
Yes, absolutely. The critique is always here for that next stage. We look forward to seeing it again.